Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. It's always delightful to be back in Nebraska and be back in this room. And I think this is the second Water for Food conference that I've been at, plus a number of other really innovative conferences here in Nebraska. So it's just been fabulous. And water and our challenges in water are an area for our foundation, one that is a burgeoning area that we expect in the next couple of years to really blossom within our organization. So let me tell you just a little bit about our foundation in case all of you don't know. This is federal funding for all government agencies. And if you see the large blue section, that's Department of Defense, and the orange section below is the National Institutes of Health, which is on a progression to become a $51 billion a year agency. If you look at that, where that arrow is pointing, that is the USDA. And our funding for agricultural science only represents about 2% of the entire federal budget for research. It's pretty dramatic considering that agriculture right now is the place to be. It is so exciting. We're seeing people flock to agriculture from all different disciplines. We're also seeing the growth of a lot of venture capitalists, new startups, some of you who are in this room. So it's really an area that deserves funding and deserves the public sector funding because of what we can do. If you think where we've come with such a small amount of money, it's truly remarkable. But because of the small amount, there was a thought that if we invest more in ag science, how are we going to do it? Should we do it in a different way? And one of the things that we have to recognize is that unlike some of our other sectors, the public sector is only a small component of research and development in agriculture. The largest component of it is from the private sector. So here was an opportunity to say, why don't we leverage what the private sector is doing and bring in this foundation that is designed to fund public-private partnerships, and therefore we can all work together towards common goals that we have both within the public sector and the private sector. So it's basically stagnant research funding led to the formation of our foundation in 2014 as a new model for funding ag science. And our mission is we build unique partnerships to support innovative science addressing today's food and agricultural challenges. So that's what we're really all about. But we have this beautiful vision that says we envision a world in which ever innovating and collaborative science provides every person accessible to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. And there's a couple of really important words in that vision. One is about science. And I am a geek freak, folks. I am a scientist, and I love science. And to see what science does for agriculture is truly incredible these days. But also the word access. So we want individuals across the world to be able to produce their own food or to have access to a food that is affordable. Because life, when it really comes down to it, as Kurt Vonnegut said, it's always, always about food. So that's our vision. How we work is that we were in the 2014 Farm Bill. We were given $200 million, of which we must match that with a non-federal match. We received another tranche of funding in 2018 Farm Bill for a total of $385 million that we've had over the course of the last 5 years. And we try to match that with all sorts of different kinds of partners. So we create these novel partnerships. We work nimbly to address issues. We are not a federal agency, nor are we a private sector company, so we can do things quite differently than others, and we leverage those public dollars. Now, we work very close collaboration with the USDA. We also support the mission of the USDA and, in fact, can serve as the USDA's fundraising arm. But we want to make sure that our funding is put on areas that don't duplicate what the USDA has. So we fill research gaps and what we say the white space. We want to work in that white space where a small amount of money can really accelerate that science forward. So there, of course, are a lot of agricultural pressures that we're now facing. We all know this: growing population, food waste, which is said to be up to 40% of all the food that we produce, climate change, and of course our limited resources, which water has a part of. So as we are doing this, we're thinking in all these areas that we have to face, what are we going to do? And just to show you what we've done over the course of the last couple years, we've made 100 grants. We've actually exceeded our funding ratio, and we're looking forward to the next couple years for our programs. But when we have all of these big pressures facing us, one of the things is that we have to look to innovation, and that's what you're all here about, right? This whole center is about innovation. And we know that innovation can solve the problems of agriculture, and we're seeing it happen as we speak. It's really an incredible time, as I said earlier, to be in there. Let's just think about data and what's happened. So right now, what's particularly important to agriculture is we're seeing this confluence of what we know of how things function along with technological advances. And when those two things come together, we see this great acceleration in science. And that's what's so important about agriculture and agricultural issues. We need to get on board now, because what the science we do today is going to be considered old-fashioned tomorrow, right? Things are happening so fast you can barely breathe. It's breathtaking how this is happening. So we're taking every advantage we can. I once saw a futurist who said, you know, the agricultural industry is one of the least disrupted industries. And what did he mean by that? Well, if you think about some of our industries that have been totally disrupted by one new technology, let's think about retail industry with Amazon, or cars that are going to be automated cars, how that's going to change the world. Agriculture may not have a single technology that's been disruptive, but I tell you, we are great adopters of those technologies, right? Every one of these new creative technologies, whether it's blockchain, whether or not it's automatic vehicles, whether it's not it's GPS imaging, we adopt these all as quickly as possible in agriculture. So we're seeing this amazing acceleration of science, and we have to be right on riding that wave in order to take advantage of every new technological breakthrough that's happening today. Data is case in point. We heard this morning all about artificial intelligence and how it's applicable to agriculture. All the data that we're generating off equipment on farms, through consumer buying preferences, et cetera. We have so much data, we practically don't know what to do with it. But it keeps accelerating. So there's been more data generated in the last 2 years than in all of humankind. Think about that. In the last 2 years, we've generated more data than in our entire history. And it keeps getting faster and faster. When you think about data, let's just think about some technologies like DNA sequencing, to use an example. So DNA sequencing has become 1 billion times faster and cheaper than when it started. I was at the USDA when we started the Plant Genome Initiative, and at the same time the Human Genome Initiative was going on. And that cost us billions and billions and billions of dollars to sequence DNA. We're getting down to the $1,000 mark to sequence your whole entire DNA. So it's been incredible. But we can't really we don't know what 1 billion times means. We can't sort of conceptualize what 1 billion times means. So I had a good example from Ed Buckler, who was the winner of the first prize at the National Academy of Sciences for agriculture. This was a new prize that started 3 years ago. The Gates Foundation and our foundation created it. It's basically the Nobel Prize for mid-career scientists in agriculture and food. He gave this example. He said, what does 1 billion times look like? Well, if you think about a computer, and there's the Mac that we all had back in the 80s, early 80s, and that's the one we have today. That's only 125,000 times faster speed than what we had then. So what does 1 billion times look like? Well, Ed used this example. He said, I have an hour walk to work, and I walk almost every day. It takes me 1 hour to walk 3.7 miles. If I was 1 billion times faster in how fast I could walk, in that hour I would walk to Pluto. So that can help you visualize how much 1 billion times means. When these things are happening so fast in science, it is a great time to be in science and a great time to be in agriculture. Again, we need to take advantage of it. And one of the great things we have about agricultural sciences is it's one of the most quickly adopted sciences there are. We talk about in cases of, for example, getting a new trait in breeding. Breeding may take 10 years or 15 years sometimes, but many times we're talking about a changing practices, something that can go directly out in the field. And so in agriculture, we also have this weird continuum where there really isn't such a thing as basic science, applied science, technology transfer, or translational science. We all merge together in agriculture because understanding a very big nuance of a plant on a very fundamental scale may mean tomorrow that we can go out and do something differently in how we plant that plant and get a change in technology. So in agriculture, it can have a noticeable influence, our research can have a noticeable influence on productivity in as little as 2 years. That's on average. That is really short for an area of science. And its impact can be felt for as long as 30 years. Think about everything that we learned from Norman Borlaug and the Green Revolution and how long that is still as the basis of a lot of what we do today. So we say, okay, so let's take all this science and then let's engage industry. And the reason, again, is because we're shifting a lot of our science to proprietary R&D. It means we have to move together. We also want the public sector to engage industry in such a way that that research that we do together can be available to all. So when we fund public-private partnerships, we make sure that those data that are generated from the partnership and the results and the publications, it all can be published and go out into the public sector. And then we work in what we call that pre-competitive space, and we talked about that this morning in our Irrigation Innovation Consortium, because that is where whatever we learn in those areas where we're working together with the private sector, it's going to benefit all. That's what we call the pre-competitive space. So here's just an example of the many kinds of organizations we work with. We've worked with, in the last 3 years, over 280 distinct funding partners with us. They range from research organizations such as the Nobel Institute, the Gates Foundation, to companies such as PepsiCo, Syngenta, Bayer, Kroger, et cetera, the whole gamut. So when you engage in that very large scale, you're getting a really broad group of ideas to be sitting with you at the table. And so we decided as an organization that we're going to try to categorize our science among these areas. And if any of you know us, when we started in the water area, we called it Lakeisha, water scarcity, overcoming water scarcity. And we decided that it's not all about water scarcity, right? Just as what we talked about this morning. It's about water use efficiency and about using every drop effectively. So we changed that area of challenge to sustainable water management. But if you look at our areas, next-gen crops, advanced animal systems, soil health, they all also have pieces of water work that go into them as well, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. So our water work extends across all of our challenge areas. So how are we going to increase water use efficiency, reduce agriculture's impact on water, and develop innovative water management technologies? We really want to do that. We heard this morning from Deborah about agriculture accounts for 70% of the global freshwater withdrawals. And it struck me that, this is, I don't want to say who cares, because that is it's an important issue that we use 70% of the water, but it would be like me saying to you, of all the consumable food on this planet, animals consume 100% of it. Well, yes, that's true, but what we do with that water is what's important here, right? So we want to make sure that as the population is growing, that we aren't exceeding our limits on water. We want to make sure that we reduce the impact of agriculture onto water quality and et cetera. So I don't think a number like that really means much. And for a company, or for a place like Chipotle, which we heard this morning, putting that kind of thing on their cup really does a disservice, as you saw this morning, to all of the great progress we've made in efficient water management. Now, what we don't want to have happen is some of the things that have happened around the world. Some of you may recognize this. This is the Aral Sea. This is between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan in what was the Soviet Union. This was the 4th largest freshwater lake in the world. very large lake. This is what it looked like in the 1960s. This is what it looked like in the 1990s. Only 10% of it was left. And this is what it looks like today. There's none of it left. In fact, if you look on the right side of that picture above that little green area, that is now called Arakam Desert. So this is the fourth largest freshwater lake that was totally diverted for agricultural purposes. And now they're devoid of water in that region because they did not take the care to use their water efficiently for agriculture. And so this is the kind of thing that we have to avoid, particularly when we're expected to need twice as much food to feed the world. We have to think about how we do this efficiently. So what we think about in FAR, and these are the areas that we're interested in the sustainable water management. Of course, in irrigation, I'll talk a moment about our irrigation consortium. Plant efficiency, water use and recovery, groundwater recharge and research, water retention through soil health and promoting soil health, promoting practices, and then of course all the technological advances that we're going to have to be able to monitor water use and to use precision smart water management wherever we can. So we do things in 4 ways. We give competitive grants. Many of you have submitted proposals to us. We can directly award things that we like. We can give out a prize, and we can fund consortia. And we have done almost all of these things in the water world, but I want to explain a few of those that we've done. And then we're looking for a prize. So if you all can think about that, I'll talk more about that in a moment. So most of you are probably in the earlier session on the IIC, which is the Irrigation Innovation Consortium. I'm going to tell this story again, Steve, if you're in the room, for any of those who don't know it. But Steve in Colorado State submitted one time a year we have an open call for all our challenge areas that's called Seeding Solutions. And Colorado State came in with a proposal to Seeding Solutions for a $1 million proposal. And how many times does this happen? But the granting agency came back to them and said, this is too small, we want something much bigger. Please help us form a consortium. And so we thought that this was prime space where we could bring potential funders from the private sector together with the universities and with different groups that represent water interests to work together on intractable issues that are happening in water management and irrigation. So here's our initial founding members. There's quite a few more and more joining, as you heard this morning. And they are really an interesting group. The way our consortia work is that we have all the members sitting around the table who work together to decide together what issues they want to fund. This really gets the perspectives from all sides. And it means that the research is going to have implications quickly, not only to producers, which is number one, but also to the companies that are part of the funding, to the universities, to the public sector. And so we have 5 consortia right now going on in FAR. This is one of our consortia and one of the ones we're most proud about to really represent the industry and to represent innovative science that can happen around a subject. We also have, as part of our mission, to fund new innovators, or what we call the next generation of agricultural scientists. We have a program where we fund new faculty members for quite large award to get them going in agriculture and to keep their research working in agriculture. As you know, when you're a new faculty member, and all faculty members, they have to be entrepreneurs, right? They have to find funding for their projects. And oftentimes, they steer their projects towards a funding agency where they think they can get funding. And because the USDA does not have a large amount of funding, oftentimes they will, even in an ag school, will sometimes get most of their funding from the National Institutes of Health or the National Science Foundation or other kinds of organizations. So we said if we can capture those people at the beginning of their careers, we know that they'll stay on that agricultural track. So this is Matt Yost at Utah State. He's working in water efficiency on management. And this is, oh my gosh. Yes. And he is at Iowa State. Thank you for that. Where's my Iowa State folks there? Yay. And he's also working on improved water quality and soil health. Now, in the case of our new innovators, they're really unbelievably great ambassadors for our program. We bring them in to Washington to get trained on communication, and then we send them up to the Hill, and we send them to meet either their senator or their representatives, and they are wonderful ambassadors for science. They're great spokespeople for science. They could talk about what science means to each person in their everyday lives. And so we really promote our individual new innovators as being those spokespeople that we can take forward for representing your community and your science. This is a USDA Pamela Ronald, who's also working. This came out through our Seeding Solutions. So this is an example, again, of a competitive program to look at drought tolerance in rice. The RIPE project. How many of you are familiar with RIPE? Okay, so you saw cassava on the bottom there as the plant that's in our photo for the conference here. The RIPE project is a project that's a collaborative project between some international members, the University of Illinois, ARS, and others to look at increasing photosynthetic efficiency in plants. They have chosen cassava, cowpea. We have come in and we're including soybean, but their model system is tobacco, because tobacco is an easy plant to use as a model system. They've been studying every nuance of photosynthesis. You know, there's over 170 different individual processes that take place in a plant to go through the photosynthetic process. So what they're doing is genetically engineering plants to try to increase, first discovering everything they can know about photosynthesis, and then trying to increase photosynthetic efficiency. And their results have been nothing short of stunning. In their results, they have had an increase of yield up to 40% in some cases, but importantly for this group, they've had increases in water use efficiency by 25%. So oftentimes, you know, when you genetically modify plants, you have trade-offs, right? You might increase yield, but you might reduce water use efficiency. One of the big controversial issues is the push towards increased yield has reduced nutrient content in plants. So there's always these trade-offs. So in order to get both increased yield and at the same time increased water use efficiency has been really, really remarkable. So while we were really looking towards yield when we funded this project so that we could accommodate feeding almost 10 billion people by 2050, the water use efficiency of this piece has been an amazing piece of the project overall. That was a direct fund, so this is an example of something that we found a partner, the Gates Foundation, and DIVID, which is a European funding unit, that we funded this multinational project directly. And then this is an egg prize. Now, what in the world does an egg prize have to do with water? So why am I bringing this up? This was our first prize that we launched. I just want to give you an example. If you want to think about an issue that we could do in water with a prize. Now, what is a prize and why is it different than just a grant? A prize is not given out till the end. Someone wins it. So you put out a call for something that you want, and everyone goes about their business working on this for some time. And then at the end, those that can meet the criterion for the prize will win it at the end. So this is an egg prize, just to give you a flavor of what these things look like. In the egg industry, we have a huge problem because we cull anywhere up to 80 million male birds on the day that they're born, so when they hatch. And the reason being, we only need females, right, for egg layers. So it's a triply complex problem because producers have to incubate those eggs for 2 weeks. When the chick is born, the chick has to, when it hatches, the chick has to be sexed. And sexing a chick is a art form. And you have to train people to sex a chick. So not only do you have to incubate them for 2 weeks, you have to sex the chick, and then you have to destroy the male chicks. So we found a partner, Open Philanthropy, who's interested in animal welfare issues. This is a huge economic issue for producers in the poultry industry. And we are giving out a $6 million prize for those that can sex that egg on the day that it's laid. Those are the kind of things, and we actually are going to give some incremental prize winners because it's expensive to work on this. So we'll give about 5 incremental prizes, and then at the end we'll give the big kahuna, the big prize, when if they can meet our requirements. Being able to sex an egg on the day it's born efficiently, cost effectively, or even earlier than the day it's born, day it's laid, excuse me. So that's how a prize works. So I want all of you to be thinking about, I'm not going to be able to be here for the rest of the conference, but I want all of you to think about, is there a big attractable issue that you could offer a prize? One of the reasons prizes work is because it could be a person at a university, it could be a person or an organization, a small business, it could be somebody in their garage. You never know. This is a worldwide competition. Anybody could compete for it. It's crowdsourcing on steroids, right? It's crowdsourcing to the biggest, largest audience, and any good ideas. Anyone could come up with an answer to this dilemma. So in the water, we want to think about something like that too. If there's some kind of prize that we could all agree on where there's this big issue that we can offer a monetary incentive, that's basically what you're trying to do to get people to work on this. It's really would be something to think about. So all of you can be thinking about that. So I want to end by just saying that, we always talk about 2050. So it is really important. 2050 is so important, but I am most concerned about what's happening right now. Because in order to position ourselves for 2050, we have to be doing the right science right now that's going to let us have a world in which we have preserved our resources and are able to have either produce food for people or have people produce their own food by 2050. So we can't really say it's 2050 that's happening. It's what's happening in 2019 that I'm concerned about. So that means that in the next 30 years is not just the most important 30 years in the history of agriculture, it's the most important 30 years that there will ever be in agriculture. Right now, folks, we're on this precipice, right? What we do today is going to mean something for 2050. So everyone, put all of your hearts and your souls in the innovation that we're going to hear about, that we've already heard about and going to be hearing about in the next couple days. And finally, I would just say what I think about, I think about all minds, so we need all the minds, the best minds at the table from wherever they reside. Remember, science has no borders. Scientists have nationalities, but science has no nationality. We need to all work together. So all minds, all ideas, and all in. And together we'll go far. Thank you very much.